Hi, I'm comics creator Joe Glass and welcome to my channel. So you're just getting into comic books and there's all these new words and terms which you don't understand and you don't know what they mean, and they're making you feel all lost and confused, and oh my god, what does that even mean? And oh my god, is my comic book cred going to come into question? Oh my god, calm down. I'm here to help you with a quick handy guide of common terms and phrases that you may not be familiar with to make traversing the comics world that much easier for you. OGN. OGN means original graphic novel. Typically, these are stories that were never released as single issue segments. They were instead released as a book-length story in the comic format. But there are also a few exceptions for books which gained more notoriety in the graphic novel form as opposed to their individual sections. TPB. TPB stands for trade paperback. These tend to be softcover collections of multiple single issues into one single book. Most commonly, these would collect an entire story arc. They would usually consist of 4 to 6 issues all collected into the one book. This will give you the whole series or possibly a story arc in a longer form series all in one place. Singles or floppies. This is a term often used to describe single issues of a comic book series. A lot of comics are released in a periodical monthly or bi-monthly format, which breaks down the story into 20-page or up segments, which all make up part of the full story. A floppy or single is a single issue or copy of this. Omnibus. An omnibus is a large collection of issues and stories, which can contain multiple issues or even multiple story arcs all in one place. In other words, a chunky boy. Anthology. An anthology is a single issue or OGN which contains multiple, usually self-contained short stories, usually created by a number of creative teams. Jumping on point. This is typically used for long-running series that have a high number of issues to denote a starting point to a new story arc or new creative team tenure. It's a good place to start if you're a new reader. You often don't need to know an awful lot of the background information to start at this point, as you will get it as you progress. Reboot. Mostly a term in superhero comics. Superhero comics have been around for a long time, and sometimes the publisher will decide to restart the continuity to help attract new readers so that they can understand things from the very beginning. This can also sometimes be used to try and keep things fresh for long-time readers. The effectiveness of this is a debate for another time and possibly another video. Generally, it means restarting the continuity of the stories going forward with a brand new origin or direction going forward through the series. This doesn't happen too often and is primarily something which is associated with the DC Comics continuity. This often takes place as a result of an event. Relaunch. A relaunch is different from a reboot in that generally the history hasn't really been changed. However, it's a fresh start for a new direction going forward. This often coincides with the end of an event or possibly with a new creative team's run. It usually makes for a good jumping on point. Retcon. A retcon is when an aspect of the comic's history or continuity has been changed within story. This is often to keep the story in line with the modern audience's expectations. For example, the war zone in which Tony Stark got the shrapnel in his heart that caused him to create the Iron Man armor has changed over the years. This is in order so that the character doesn't appear to be older than they actually are presented. Initially, it happened in the Vietnam war zone, but more recently it's been Iraq and also now a fictional Asian country. LCS. LCS stands for local comic book shop or store. This is a specialty store that focuses on the sale of comic books, graphic novels, and even merchandise and ephemera, which are popular amongst various forms of media geek culture. They're wonderful places and you totally need to find your nearest one as soon as you can. Pull list. A pull list is a standing order list of items and comics that a reader might want to have the comic shop collect for them. It's a way of letting the comic shop know what comics you want to buy. It's a good way for a retailer to order these for you and to make sure that you never miss out on an issue. FOC. FOC stands for Final Order Cutoff. This means the last date in which retailers need to send the distributor any orders for a particular issue or title. Readers should get their orders to their retailers well before this date. It's not just important for the comic shop, but it's also how publishers gauge the longevity and potential continuation of a series. Splash or splash page. This is a page or 2 pages of art that aren't really broken down into panels or contain a major element of just a few panels on the page. Think of it as where the art splashes out of the panel borders and fills the page. This can be a single page splash or spread, or a double page spread. An event. In comics, an event is usually a story that connects multiple titles and series into one major story, a large story which will usually change the status quo of the publishing line going forward. Think about Avengers Infinity War and Endgame and how that got various different movie continuities and locations into one larger story that would affect all the movies going forward. These happen, well, a lot in superhero comics, often once a year, if not more. Sometimes the event doesn't involve the whole universe, sometimes it involves just a section of that universe. For example, you might get an X-Men event. Run. A run is generally a creative team's or a single writer or artist's time on a book. Publishers tend to coincide jumping on points or sometimes events with the end of a team's run. Panel. A panel is the box or window in which the art is. The page then is made up of a series of panels. Each one progresses the story step by step. Panels are most commonly square or rectangular, but they can really be any shape or size. Art can even break out of the panels when used effectively. Gutters. The gutters are the space in between the panels. These are most commonly white or a white space, but they can be often filled with colour or even black. Gutters can simply be the borders, or they can be used as a method of progressing the story along, or even as an element of the story. Variant? A variant primarily pertains to a limited print run of different covers of a particular issue. This is to add an element of collectability to a single comic's sales. Publishers use this a lot to appeal to collectors, and they encourage the purchase of multiple copies of single issues. Speculators often purchase and sell these variant covers, and their value is based on how rare they are. Mini-series, or mini. A mini-series or mini is a short run on a particular character or team that is done by a specific creative team. The story is often self-contained, and while it may have lasting effects for the character, it may not have lasting effects on the wider publishing line. They are typically 3 to 6 issues in length. A mini is different from an event because it usually involves just one character or team or a corner of the publishing universe and not the whole universe. Also, a mini-series may or may not be canon. Maxi-series. A maxi-series is a longer mini-series, usually consisting of 8 to 12 issues. Again, these may or may not be considered canon, which leads us to canon or non-canon. Canon is a term which exists in many fandoms for various fictional characters and worlds. It typically refers to whether the story fits in and exists within the wider long-running story of that particular universe. For example, The Dark Knight Returns is an example of a Batman story which is very important, but is not considered to be canon in the main Batman mythos. Non-canon, therefore, is content which is not considered part of the true story. It instead utilises those characters and their locations and worlds, but tells its own story in its own timeline. For many readers, the discussion of whether a story is canon or non-canon is vitally important, whilst for others, the story's quality itself is all that really matters. Okay, well, I hope that crash course in the secret language of comics has been helpful to you. End of the day, you don't really need to be proficient in every single little bit. The main focus is that you're enjoying what you're reading. As long as you're doing that, then you're all good. Still, it can never hurt to get an understanding of what's going on around you. Hopefully this has been useful to you, but are there any other terms and phrases that you'd like to understand better? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for all future content on Joe Glass Comics. Goodbye!